Medallion architecture is a way of organizing a data platform into three layers: bronze, silver, and gold, where bronze holds raw data exactly as it arrived, silver holds clean, deduplicated, conformed data, and gold hands the business-ready tables that people will actually query. So, first thing I want you to understand about Medallion architecture is that it's not a technology, which is the first kind of assumption I hear a lot. You don't install it. There's no Medallion button in Databricks or Snowflake and BigQuery or wherever you work. It's really just a naming convention plus a set of agreements about what a table is allowed to contain at each stage. And when you say it out loud, it is kind of underwhelming, right? Because it is. Right? And the value really lives in the discipline of applying this technique. And the discipline is free, but it's also hard to make sure you're maintaining over a long time frame. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through what belongs in each layer, the 4 rules that keep those layers honest, a few mistakes that I see teams make over and over again, and also cases where you can just skip this pattern entirely. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, I want to start out with kind of the core reason that Medallion architecture exists in the first place, which is because a single big transformation step in for a pipeline, let's say I wanted to go straight from raw data to my gold table, would be almost impossible to debug. The shape of the problem is, a team will start out with a script that reads from an API or a database, then does some cleanup, applies some business logic, and writes a table that the dashboard reads. And it's one job, source in, dashboard out. Works great for, maybe 4 months, maybe a year, maybe a couple years. But then one day, someone in finance says the revenue number looks wrong, right? And now you have a question you can't answer is, was the source data wrong, or did your cleanup logic drop rows, or did the business logic change last Tuesday? And you can't tell because all of those things happen inside the same job. The only thing you kept was the output. The raw data is gone, the intermediate state never existed, so you rerun the whole thing and hope it comes out different and then try to figure out what went wrong. If you've been on the wrong end of this, it very much hurts, right? Where you maybe have a pipeline that pulls from a vendor API every night, and one morning the number's off by 8%, and it'll take you 2 days to work out that the vendor had actually quietly started returning a new status value that my filter was dropping, right? And if you had kept the raw payload, that's maybe a 20-minute fix job. But if you don't have that information, it can be up to 2 days, right? So the fix is to stop treating a pipeline as one step and start treating it as a series of stages where each stage has one job and each stage relieves its output on disk. So raw stays raw, cleaning happens away from business logic, and every stage leaves behind something that you can go and look at. So bronze, silver, and gold is just that idea with the names attached. There's nothing more clever than that. So the first stage of this pipeline is the bronze table, right? And the bronze table is a durable, append-only copy of your source data in its original form, whose job it is to make sure you never have to ask the source system for the same data twice. So the rule I use for bronze is simple. There's no business logic or filtering or renaming or typecasting that could fail. If the source sends you a column called cust numer 1 full of trailing white space, bronze gets that exact same thing full of trailing white space. And if a row is malformed, bronze gets the malformed row. You're not fixing anything here, you're just taking a photograph. Now the thing you do add to the data here is metadata about the load itself. On every bronze table you want to have the ingestion timestamp, the source system name, the source file name or partition or offset, and ideally also a batch identifier. And these columns will cost you almost nothing in storage, and they turn up when did this row show up and where did it came from a research project into a where clause. And then also, why append only? Because bronze is your recovery position, right? So if your silver logic has a bug that ran for 3 weeks, you want to be able to fix the logic and replay from bronze rather than go back to a production database that's already rewritten the values you needed, or an API that only retains 90 days of history. Bronze is the reason that you can say we can rebuild it and actually have that be a true statement. And then a few practical notes here as well is partition bronze by ingestion date, not by some business data or date buried in the payload, because ingestion date is the thing you'll actually filter on when you replay. So store semi-structured payloads as is in a variant or JSON column rather than shredding them into columns immediately, since shredding is a transformation and transformations belong downstream. And then also put a retention policy on it because bronze grows forever and no one will notice until the storage bill does. And then another question that you'll hear a lot is, does bronze mean you're keeping every version of every row forever? Not necessarily, but it normally means keeping every event you received. So if your source is a CDC stream, bronze holds the change events. If your source is a nightly full snapshot, bronze holds every snapshot as its own partition. Either way, the raw record of what arrived is what you're preserving. Now, the next layer, the silver layer, is where raw data becomes correct data. So silver tables are clean, typed, deduplicated, and conformed to a shared model, and they represent entities rather than events from one specific system. And concretely, this is where you're going to be doing a lot of the work, right? You're going to be casting the strings to actual dates and decimals, trim the white space, standardize country codes so that US and USA, United States, stop being three different customers worth of rows, drop or quarantine records that fail your quality checks, deduplicate because at least once delivery means you will get duplicates, and pretending otherwise is how you end up double counting revenue. And then silver is also where you join across sources. So if customer data lives in your billing system and also in your CRM, silver is where you resolve those into one customer table with one key. And that word conformed is doing a lot of work in this definition because it means a customer is a customer regardless of which pipeline produced the row. So same key, same shape, same meaning. And the part that a lot of people will get wrong is that silver should not contain business definitions. Cleaning is not the same as interpreting. Casting a timestamp is cleaning. Deciding that an active customer is someone with a transaction in the last 90 days is a business definition, and that belongs one layer up. So the test I use is whether two departments could disagree about it. Nobody argues whether a date should be a date. People argue constantly about what counts as active or what counts as churn and which revenue is recognized when. Anything you can get in a meeting about goes in gold. And silver is also the right home for slowly changing dimensions. So if you need to know what a customer's plan tier was back in March, silver is where you keep a history table with valid from and valid to columns, which is a structural fact about the entity, not an opinion about it. And then silver is also where most of the value in a data platform actually gets created, and it's a layer that nobody wants to be assigned to because it produces nothing you can put on a dashboard. And there's no demo or screenshot or applause. But the layer that everyone really does care about is what silver leads it to. And that is going to be the gold layer, right? The gold layer holds business-ready tables that are shaped for a specific consumer. So gold is where your metrics get defined, where aggregates get computed, and the model gets shaped around a question that someone will actually be asking it. So a gold table might be a star schema for a BI tool. It might be one enormous denormalized table because your dashboard tool joins slowly, and you'd rather pay that cost once at build time instead of every time someone opens the report. Feature tables for your model live here as well, and so does that flat extract that gets pushed to your marketing platform every day at 6. And then whatever the shape, gold gets built backwards from the question someone needs answered rather than forwards from whatever the source needed to happen. And this is the layer where you finally encode the definitions. So monthly recurring revenue, active user, attributed conversion. Each one of those needs to exist exactly in one place. And if MRR is computed in 4 different gold tables, you'll have 4 MRR numbers, and they will disagree during the one meeting where it's going to end up mattering most. And then gold is also the only layer that most of your organization should have direct access to. So analysts query gold, executives see gold, silver is available to the data team and analytics engineers who know what they're looking at. Bronze is basically for engineers and for replay. And some people might call that gatekeeping, but it's also the thing that stops someone building a board level report on a raw table full of duplicates and then telling you the pipeline is broken. You want everyone to have their proper swim lane. And then one other nuance worth knowing is that gold tables are usually the cheapest layer to rebuild because everything they depend on is already clean and sitting in silver. So you can be much more relaxed about changing gold than changing bronze. And if a definition changes, you rebuild gold from silver and then you're just done in minutes. So now, what are those 4 rules I talked about earlier for making sure that your medallion architecture stays honest, and what's going to happen if you drop any of them? Rule 1, data should only ever flow downhill. Bronze feeds silver, silver feeds gold. A gold table never reads from bronze, and if you find yourself reaching back 2 layers, it's a signal something's missing in silver, and the fix is to add it to silver, not routing around it. The moment you allow shortcuts, you're losing the ability to reason about lineage, and lineage is most of what you are getting out of this. Rule 2 is that every layer is reproducible from the one above it. So if bronze survives, you can rebuild everything else. If you lose bronze, then you're on a support ticket asking a vendor whether they can re-export you 18 months of history, right? And then next, rule 3 is that transformations are idempotent. Running the same job twice with the same output has to produce the same result, not double the rows. And in practice, this means, merge on a key or overwrite a partition rather than blindly appending in silver and gold. Pipelines fail halfway and they get rerun. That's normal. Your job is to make that rerun boring. And then rule 4 is that quality checks live at the layer boundaries. Check on the way into silver, which catches source problems, and check on the way into gold, which catches logic problems. Row counts, null rates on key columns, uniqueness on primary keys, referential checks between tables, and decide ahead of time whether a failed check means that stops the pipeline or quarantines the bad rows and keeps going, because deciding that during an incident at 2 a.m. is inviting trouble and bad decisions. So now 5 ways that this can go wrong for you, right, is mistake number 1, treating your layer names as folders instead of contracts. I've seen platforms with a bronze schema, a silver schema, and a gold schema where the actual transformation logic is just all crammed into one step, and the middle layer is a straight copy, so you've got the vocabulary but none of the benefit. So if your silver table is select all from bronze, delete it. Mistake 2, putting business logic in silver, and this is a very common one. And it's tempting because the logic has to go somewhere, and silver is right there. But once a business definition is baked into silver, every gold table inherits it, whether it wants to or not. And changing that means rebuilding everything downstream. Then mistake 3, insisting on exactly 3 layers when your problem doesn't have 3. Nothing is sacred about the number 3. Plenty of good platforms have a staging area between bronze and silver, or split gold into a shared dimensional core plus consumer-specific marts. What matters is that each layer has a distinct job, and then adding a layer with no job is bureaucracy. Mistake 4, no retention or compaction policy or strategy. Bronze accumulates small files and old partitions forever, so 6 months in, your queries can slow down and your storage costs can triple, and everyone will blame the query engine. But you want to set retention on bronze, keep it reasonable, and then compact your small files on a schedule and then revisit that quarterly. And then mistake 5, no ownership per layer. If nobody owns silver, nobody owns bronze, they're going to rot. Every new pipeline adds a slightly different customer table, and 2 years later, you're going to have, multiples of what you had right now. So name an owner for each layer, even if it's the same one for now for all the layers, and you'll have success with avoiding a lot of those issues. Now, before I just quickly recap, I also want to talk about, where you might want to skip Medallion architecture, right? Because it does cost you storage and complexity. So if you're a small team with a handful of sources and a single dashboard, right, a 2-layer setup of raw plus data mart is going to serve you fine, and you can add a middle layer when you start feeling pain. If your workload is actually real-time, sub-second, materializing 3 layers is going to add latency you also probably can't afford, and streaming architectures will solve this a different way. So if your source system is already clean, governed, modern warehouse, relaying it as raw and recleaning its work is also work with no payoff. So adopt the pattern when you feel a specific pain it solves, right? Which is, I can't tell where this number went wrong, or I can't reprocess without going back to the source. If you don't feel those, you probably don't need this. And so just to recap, Medallion architecture organizes a data platform, 3 layers. Bronze is raw, append-only, never modified, replay when something breaks there. Silver is clean, typed, deduplicated, and conformed, and it contains no business definitions. And then gold is business ready, shaped for a specific customer or consumer, and it's where metric definitions live, each in exactly one place. 4 rules keep it working, right? Data flows downhill only. Every layer is rebuildable from the one above it. Transformations are idempotent, so reruns are safe, and quality checks sit at the layer boundaries. And the point of it is all one thing. When a number looks wrong, you can walk backwards layer by layer until you find where it went broke. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. Data Guy out.